It's been almost a month since the Judicial Service Commission advised the President to suspend Western Cape Judge President Judge Hlophe. But there's still no progress in this 14-year-old battle. Let's talk to Mbekezeli Benjamin, who's written on the subject. Mbekezeli is with Judges Matter and a regular contributor here on Newzroom Afrika. Mbekezeli, good to see you. As always, you say that the Hlophe matter, in fact, is an example of an institutional dysfunction. Explain what you mean by that.
Good afternoon, Mbekezeli, and to the viewers at home. Yes, the Hlophe matter is a symptom of a bigger problem that is affecting the system to hold judges accountable in cases of misconduct. As you correctly point out, it's been 14 years of back and forth within the system. At some point, we didn't have a system to speak of. The JSC was dealing with complaints as and when they came. And so in 2010, they changed the law to create a system that had a standing committee that receives complaints and a tribunal that investigates cases of serious misconduct. So what has happened is that the Hlophe case has been tied up in this entire system where we see a lot of loopholes in terms of the decisions that have to be taken. There are multiple levels of decision making. All of them can be subject to reviews in court, which causes delays. So what we as Judges Matter are concerned about is that this system is far too complex, it's far too convoluted, and is simply not doing the job that it's supposed to, which is to hold judges accountable. And
why do you think the judiciary is so bad or so lacking when it comes to coming up with rules that are clear? You've described the rules currently as rather opaque, or at least the mechanisms, I should say, in governing itself and also holding, especially its most senior members, accountable.
So when we speak about the judiciary, we must be very careful who we're speaking about. So here it's a little bit complicated because Parliament is the one that writes the law, and Parliament is the one that wrote the law that created this misconduct system. So first of all, they are to blame. Mm-hmm. But secondly, the Judicial Service Commission, which is a body that is made up of judges, of members of Parliament, of practicing lawyers, that body is also not doing its job in terms of allocating enough resources for the system to work, but also making sure that the cases that are filed move swiftly within the system. So there are multiple role players here, and it's not only the judges. But of course, we are concerned that ultimately this reflects badly on the judges themselves, because we don't want to have a situation now where we face judges who either have questions over their heads about their conduct and their integrity. So it ultimately affects the judges, but there are lots of role players within the system.
With that in mind, then, the JSC, shall we say, as the face of the judiciary in this country, at least as far as these issues are concerned, yes, the politicians draft the legislation, right? Is it being held enough to account to make sure that the processes are as seamless as they should be?
The short answer to that question is no. The reason why I say so is because Parliament, in fact, is the one that has oversight responsibility of the Judicial Service Commission. The law, the JSC Act at Section 6, it's very clear that the JSC must report to Parliament on a regular basis, and Parliament must scrutinize how the JSC is functioning. That has not happened for a number of years, for reasons that we actually don't know. We don't know why the JSC has not been filing its reports in Parliament, and Parliament has been asking questions of those reports. But we hope that in the coming months, and we know that the JSC is coming before Parliament in October, we're hoping that we will get serious answers to some of these questions, because over the last couple of years, that has not happened.
And can and should, more broadly, a structure exist that holds the judiciary accountable that's not necessarily made up of members of the judiciary?
We think that the structure should still be made up of members of the judiciary, but who those members are is important. Right now, the current structure has active sitting judges who are deciding on misconduct complaints. That system is unworkable because not only are those judges competing with a workload in the courts and they just don't have time to deal with misconduct complaints, but the second aspect of this problem is that those judges either have to sit in judgment over senior colleagues or colleagues that they are sitting with in the bench. So it's a lot like having judges of the Western Cape High Court sitting over their own boss. That is an awkward situation. So the members of the judiciary that we think should be handling misconduct cases are retired judges. Not only do they have the time to deal with the cases, but they also don't sit in court on a regular basis. So they are a little bit removed from the live issues, and so they can be able to deal with the cases as effectively as they should.
Talk about awkwardness. Let me ask you a slightly perhaps more awkward question. Are judges in this country averse to being held accountable?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think they're failed by the system more than them personally refusing to be held accountable. Because what we've seen, for example, when there is a complaint filed against the judge is supposed to submit an affidavit explaining the circumstances how that misconduct complaint arose. In the vast majority of cases, the judges are responsive. They are responding to the complaints. But the complaints are taking far too long to be dealt with. Just one example. Advocate Ngalwano filed a complaint against Judge Hlophe. They filed their submissions and their affidavits in June of last year. But the decision on whether or not Judge Hlophe was guilty of misconduct, it only came in July of this year. So it took a year before that complaint was dealt with. And that's not something that Judge Hlophe had any say over. It's just the system being far too slow. So I think the system is to blame much more than the judges themselves.
And how then do you think that alters those delays? To what extent do you think they alter the public perception and public view of the judiciary, and especially whether or not judges in this country want to subject themselves to these processes, and whether their colleagues themselves also want to make sure that matters are resolved speedily?
Well, I think ultimately the picture that is created is one in which you posed in your previous question, is that are judges refusing to be held accountable? If we are not seeing cases of misconduct being dealt with as quickly as possible, it does create the impression that judges are refusing to be held accountable, which is extremely unfair. Recently, there was a judge who was appointed to the Constitutional Court, and there were pending cases against him. Those cases, he said, he's tried every measure possible to move them along, but the system is not dealing with them expeditiously. So he's getting a promotion with a certain of those cases not being dealt with, and it creates the impression that he himself has questions over his integrity, when it very well likely is not the case. So I think
the other danger that it creates is a trial in the court of public opinion.
Absolutely, it does, and unfortunately, judges cannot participate in that court of public opinion. In fact, we don't want our judges to be having it out in public. But the problem now is the system should be acting quickly to deal with cases so that we never ever have to debate these kinds of issues in public.
Mbekezeli Benjamin, always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you.